All right, so we are on The Accidental Hero.
Yes.
Chapter 3, Shadow of the Rustov. Yeah. Jack woke up to the sound of rolling waves. He was confused at first, as people generally are when they wake up in a strange place without warning. As he sat up in bed, it all came flooding back. The robo-zombie, the emissary, the blue giant, and the boat. There was no dream. He was really on the boat. This was really happening. Remember, he's headed to the land of imagination, where all things are possible. Jack could feel the ship moving as he looked around the bedroom, or stateroom as it was called on a sea vessel. Jack's vocabulary was filled with nautical terms he'd learned from his Pirate Academy and Starfleet comics. The stateroom was nicer than any room he'd ever slept in, but Jack was too excited to stay in bed. He got up to explore the ship. Jack walked upstairs, wobbled a little as he went. He'd never been on a boat before and needed some time to get his sea legs underneath him. He stumbled onto the upper deck. The main room was empty. Worn burgundy leather couches and club chairs rested on honey-colored hardwood floors, and a classic globe turned slowly with the tides in an oak stand. Jack saw countless charts and maps spread out on tables next to various artifacts or rolled up and tucked away into cubby holes. There was a TV in the room, but it wasn't like any TV Jack had ever seen. It was a razor-thin holographic projection floating in midair just off the wall. Jack reached up to touch it. The screen rippled like a pool of water as his hand passed right through the light image. Sunlight poured in from sweeping windows that lined the walls and looked out on the open sea. There was no land on the horizon in any direction. Jack stepped forward through a full kitchen, or galley as he knew it to be called, and onto the bridge of the ship. The captain's chair sat empty before him. The golden floorboards at the helm were contrasted by dark wood that encased a high-tech computerized control panel. In front of that panel was an ornate wooden wheel that looked like it had been taken from an old pirate ship. Jack felt like he was looking at the future and the past at the same time. The readout on the control panel flashed the message, "Autopilot engaged," over and over. Jack wondered where everyone was before hearing voices outside the cabin. Voices talked about him coming from upstairs. Voices talking about him coming from upstairs. Behind him, a stairway wound up to the open-air top deck. Jack crept up slowly and silently, listening closely as he climbed the steps. "I can't believe you," Jack heard Blue said to Jason. "Why would I lie?" Jack crouched at the top of the stairs, just out of sight to listen. "I don't think you're lying," Blue replied, "but when you said you were going to check him out, not bring him back, I can't believe you made the decision like this based on some random letter someone wrote you." "The letter was real," Jason replied. "It came from..." "You don't know if he wrote it or not," Blue said. "No one's seen him since the invasion. It could be a trick. I mean, isn't he dead?" "Don't say that," Jason said. "You don't know that for sure." "I know you're stirring up a storm," Blue said, "and I know that you're starting to. Smart's not going to be happy when it finds out that you're bringing in somebody new. You of all people." "Smart's never been happy in his whole life," Jason replied.
Ugh. Simon! What the heck?
Miss Elena, do you want to go up to the office with all your stuff? They can't find your notes for it, and so hopefully they can find it and they can send it right back. Okay. Okay. Smart Jack's never been happy his whole life, Jason replied, and he's not going to be happy until he makes the entire imagination a police state. People are finally starting to talk about it, you know. I know, Blue said. Someone has to stand up. I'm with you there. I just hope you're not using this poor kid to do it. Jack raised an eyebrow. He didn't like the sound of that. Jason scowled at Blue. Do I tell you how to do your job, he asked. The proper way to punch somebody in the face or how to put your head through a brick wall? The kid has a right to go home, Blue. No matter what anyone says, he deserves that much. Blue put a hand on Jason's shoulder. I always back your play partner, you know that, but what's right and what's popular aren't always the same thing. Even in the imagination, people get awfully funny where the Rustov are concerned. The Rustov just tried to kill him, Jason said. And when was the last time you heard of that happening, Blue asked. Rustov, parasoldiers operating in the outside world? You'd have to go back to the invasion for that. The question is, what's next? 10 Rustov? 100? People back home haven't had to deal with these kind of numbers in quite a while. And the fact is, they like it that way. If more of these things follow the kid back, it's going to be bad for him and you. What things? Jack asked, stepping out of the stairwell. Is that what you call the thing that came after me today? A Rustov? Jason and Blue looked up, totally taken by surprise. They traded embarrassed looks after being caught red-handed talking about Jack. All right, Jack, Jason said. You're going to find out soon enough anyway. Have a seat up here and we'll tell you everything. Jack did as he was told, taking a seat across from Jason and Blue. I'm sure you have a million questions, Jason said. The fact is, so do we. Even by our standards, this has been a pretty unusual day. This morning, you faced off against one of the baddest bad guys in the whole universe. What was that thing? Jack asked. Troy, put that away. A Rustov parasoldier, Blue answered. Alien invaders, nasty ones too. I read about them today in a comic book, Jack said. Only they were called robo-zombies. They were fighting a hero called Prime. You know about Prime, Blue asked. Jason looked at Blue. He's real too, he asked. As real as the Rustov, Blue replied. I could see why you'd call them robo-zombies. Infected people usually end up looking like zombies by the time the Rustov are done with them. They're cybernetic parasites, Jason explained. Most of the people in the imagination are still pretty scared of them. They infect other living organisms and use them as hosts, taking over their bodies and stealing their life energy. They can only survive on the backs of other life forms, and their victims turn into Rustov soldiers just like them. Jack thought it was remarkably similar to what he'd just read about in the pages of... Okay. Whoa! Hello? Oh. Okay. All right, thank you. Bye. Okay, hang that up for me, will you? Oh, no. Too late. All right, never mind. Oh, I've never seen you okay. Okay,
That's Kennison.
we got Golden and Elena.
Oh, Miss Kennison.
Woo! There's nothing like running across the classroom to answer two phones at once. All right, well, that was fun. Okay. Jack thought it was all remarkably similar to what he'd read about in the pages of Unreal Tales number 42. In my comic book, Prime was turning into one of them too, he told Jason and Blue. He started to get that mark in his eye, like the one they all have. You'll be glad to know that Prime is just fine, Blue said, but that's how it starts. It's the mark on the eye. That's the first sign of infection. The one that came after me, it didn't try to infect me, Jack said. It tried to kill me. I know, Jason said. It's strange. I can't explain it. What does all this have to do with me going to the imagination? Louise, please put that away. Jack wanted to know. I told you about my job as an emissary, Jason began. How we go around the world planting clues about the imagination, looking for people who are developing superpowers. Well, 12 years ago, The Rustov invaded Earth. Isaiah. Ever since then, we've been discouraged from actually bringing any superpowered people back to our island. People are still very suspicious of outsiders back home. Hang on, Jack said. Superpowers? You really think I have superpowers? I know you do, Jason said without blinking. Blue agreed with Jason. You don't survive a Rustov ambush without a few superpowers, Blue said. Jack could hardly believe his ears. Even with everything that already happened that day, he still couldn't quite accept that he was part of all this. Will you guys please turn back on your cameras? I don't know why all of you decided to turn them off. Go, Kale. Jack could hardly believe his ears. Even with everything that already happened that day, he still couldn't quite accept that he was part of this. He kept waiting for Jason and Blue to realize it was some big mistake. I didn't do anything this morning, Jack said. I didn't even try. I just ran. Troy, please turn it back on. Thank you, Troy and Luis. Now stop being disruptive and distracting to each other and listen politely like gentlemen. Look, said Jason, not everyone has an obvious superpower origin. For every person who gets their powers from a lab accident or some magic amulet, there's another 10 people who just happen to be born with powers. People don't always know which category they fall into. They just know they have superhuman abilities. But I don't know that, Jack said. Yeah, weird stuff happens around me, but it's not because I'm doing anything. There isn't anything special I can do. Anyway, why bring me to the imagination if we're just going to get in trouble for it? I don't need to go someplace where everyone's going to give me a hard time. I could have just stayed at St. Barnaby's for that. I'm bringing you there because I have a feeling about you, Jason said. You're special, Jack. You have to trust me on this. Standing right here, I can gauge your power level, and it's off the charts. Troy, do I need to call your mother? You're interrupting our whole class and the other people online, so stop. You have incredible potential. I felt it all the way from the imagination. Really? Jack asked. Mr. Calhoun said my potential topped out a toilet brush cleaner. A toilet brush cleaner, Blue repeated, flabbergasted. What? The guy was a real piece of work, Jason said, shaking his head. You know I used the Department of Departmental Affairs line on him, he asked Blue. You did not, Blue said. I did, Jack. Am I lying? Jack shook his head and smirked, and Blue busted out laughing. Jason followed suit, and eventually Jack did too. One thing about laughter is it's contagious. When Jason caught his breath, he turned to Jack with a smile. Don't worry, Jack. I've got a feeling the imagination is ready for you, whether they know it or not. You've got a big future, a real big future, and it starts today. No doubt, Blue agreed. Anyone says otherwise, and I'll bring the pain. Right, partner? Blue added, tapping Jason with a little punch in the shoulder. Right, Jason said, wincing and rubbing his shoulder. Amy, stop. We're partners now too, Blue said to Jack. He put his big fist to Jack to bump. Don't leave me hanging, little man. Come on. Jack smiled. All right, he said, and gave Blue a fist pound. That's what I'm talking about, Blue said with a laugh, and gave Jack a small pat on the back that nearly knocked him over the side of the boat. That evening, Jack watched the sunset from the bow of the Vision's forward deck. Out there on the ocean, the view looked nothing like he'd seen before. The whole sky was filled with orange and red glow that lit the clouds from behind and made the colors spread like finger paint. The sun was a golden coin sinking into the invisible piggy bank somewhere far below the horizon. The warm breeze on his face and the soothing sound of gulls squawking in the distance was quite a change from the icy gray weather he'd observed from his window that morning. Shouldn't it be colder out here this time of year, he asked Jason. This boat travels faster than you think. We've made some minor modifications to her, Jason said with a wink as the Vision's powerful motor hummed along smoothly. Blue can't stand the cold, so he sped us out to warm waters while you were sleeping. We're somewhere in the Caribbean now. Is that where the imagination is? Jack asked. It is right now, Jason answered. It's hard to say where the imagination is, though, because it never stays in one place for too long. It's what we call a roaming island. It moves, Jack asked. The whole island, Jason said, nodding, all around the world, constantly. It never stays in one place long enough for people to stumble upon it. If you want to find the imagination, you have to really go looking for it. Or at least they did. Jason gave a disappointed look. People used to come from all over the world, each bringing along their own culture, their own style. When the island was close to China, when it was close to England, when it was close to Guadalajara, people from those places would seek out the imagination. But you said you don't have to believe in it. You said you have to believe in it to get there, Jack said. How did they know to look for it? It wasn't always such a big secret, Jason explained. Before our time, the legend of the imagination used to be a lot more widespread. Emissaries did their jobs back then like we do now. But back then, a lot more people took notice. In the age of exploration, during the Enlightenment, back then people had a vision. They had a sense of adventure. And today, Jack asked? Today is different, Jason said, staring at the sunset. He looked sad, like he was watching the sun go down on something he cared for deeply, something that was nearly gone. It doesn't help when emissaries only do their job halfway either, Jason finally added. We haven't closed borders yet, though. By law, anyone who finds the imagination on their own is welcome on our shores, and the people do still find the island. They find the clues, they hear the stories, and they come. It's not like it was before, though. Somewhere along the line, people just stopped believing. That's a shame, Jack said. It is, Jason agreed, but there's always tomorrow. We may not get as many visitors as we used to, but the people who come go on to do amazing things. I'm not just talking about people with superpowers either. I'm talking about writers, musicians, philosophers, people you've probably heard of, people who've changed the world. But if they're really superheroes and other stuff out there, how come I've never seen them or read about them? Haven't you read about them? Jason asked. Yeah, in the comic books, but not in the news. Wouldn't that change things? Wouldn't more people believe? We're going to stop there. We will finish up chapter 3, chapter 3 tomorrow and start chapter 4.